Hello and welcome to Career Talk. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO at the CCMA and host of Career Talk. Now today I am joined by Adam Gould, Head of Customer Service and Engagement at Castles and Coasts Housing Association, which, by the way, I love that, Castles and Coasts. I love that. How are you doing, Adam?
Very well, thank you. Lovely to see you, Lee.
Yeah, great to have you on board. Now, I can't wait to hear all about your career, your challenges, your successes. I know that this is an opportunity for those that are listening to hear what you've been up to and really get some advice from you as well. But first, your LinkedIn profile. Now, you say that you ran the Joe Mangel Appreciation Society when you were at university. Now, I remember Joe Mangel from Neighbours. Please explain.
It was Joe Mangel from Neighbours, and Neighbours was a bit of a cult thing in the very late 80s and early 90s while I was a student. And he was quite a witty character. And in my second year, some chums and I decided to pull together a society and attract freshers, and we get some funding and things like that. But the whole agenda around the society was to organise nightclubs trips to various nightclubs, from the Hacienda in Manchester to the Dome in Birmingham or whatever, and put on events for people. And I originally wanted to call it the SAS, which was the Smirnoff Appreciation Society, but I was overruled because I thought we'd attract more freshers by giving them a shot of vodka at sign up. But it took off, and I thought it was quite a witty name, Joe Mangel Appreciation Society. We never invited him to any event or anything like that. We couldn't afford the airfare from Australia, I guess.
Oh, dear. And you didn't spend your entire time watching Neighbours with the rest of the members from the Joe Mangel Appreciation Society?
We did spend, I think Neighbours was a bit of a cult thing at the time I was a student. And believe it or not, Neighbours used to be on twice a day. I think, well, to my shame, I remember this, 1:30 and 5:30 on BBC One. And did I ever watch it twice when I should have been doing some studying? Possibly.
I'm with you. Anyway, back to your career today. So I do want to go back to your university times, find out what it was that you wanted to do as you were growing up. But first of all, you're head of customer service and engagement at Castles and Coasts. What does that mean? What's your role today? What are you doing today in that role?
There are two key areas to that role. One is managing the customer service operation. So that's dealing with all interactions from our residents, whether it's via email, telephone, web chat. We've been implementing more and more mediums and channels, for customers to contact us, particularly as we closed our front of house during the lockdown. And that's probably something else we can talk about a little later. But it's about building the capability of our team to be able to handle more inquiries. And what we have found, particularly in the housing sector, as other public services have been cut, as we know about, that generally the housing sector is quite paternal or maternal. And what we're finding is people are coming to us with inquiries that would have traditionally gone to other public sector organisation. And we are here for, as a social landlord, we do far more than a private landlord would do. We address antisocial behaviour. We've got funds to help people during these financially difficult times. It really, and most people who go into social housing, they do it to actually make things better and the lives better for people. And a lot of my peers actually grew up in social housing, and they've moved and wanted to give something back. So we deal with all customer-related inquiries, try to make things better, look at processes across the organisation, see how we can make them more slick, easier for customers to navigate. But another key element of the role is the engagement side. And housing associations have always been listening to their customers, but now it's more important than ever for a number of reasons. We know as a sector, and even the customer service industry as a whole, expectations are rising, and we are seeing that a lot of customer satisfaction deteriorating and organisations are seeing more complaints. So we need to understand what our customers are saying to improve our service to them. And I've got a team that will hopefully that it's just growing in its importance to the organisation, because its sphere of influence affects every single department. So what we do with that we get feedback from customers. So after most service interventions, we'll find out how satisfied the customers were, and then we meet with departments on a regular basis with complaints data, see what we can do to improve that service and stop those issues happening again for people.
Interesting. And now I've got a funny feeling that we're going to hear more about your how much you care about society when we go through your career, because that seems to, from the chat we had before we came on air, I sense that you actually have quite a deep care for society, and it's not just a business level.
I think yes, certainly for that. But I also thrive on seeing people I work with develop as well. I remember being frustrated as a young operational manager, seeing team leaders move on or whatever, and that was wrong. It's good to see people flourish, and I do get an awful lot out of just helping people and supporting people.
Do you know what? That's one of the things that I am really hearing from a lot of the leaders that I talk to, is that the people aspect, seeing people thrive, like you just said, seeing people develop, seeing people thrive. It does seem to be at that commonality of leaders in our sector.
I think you hear often the models of treating. I think when you treat people like adults, the adult to adult relationship, people thrive and people trust. And if you speak to any of my team members, they can say anything to me. I'd far rather hear it face to face. And it's encouraging for me that people feel they can say these things, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, I agree. Right. So I want to go back to the beginning. Now, you were at university. You're at the University of Wolverhampton. You studied business studies. Did you go to university because it was just the next step, because that's what you wanted to do? Why did you go to university in the first place?
I originally wanted to become a police officer, but I was too short at 18. I got a bit taller in my later teens, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I thought business studies would be very good, because it would give me exposure, for want of a better phrase, of the different aspects of business as I saw it in those days. So accountancy, economics, HR, law, marketing, accountancy, all those sorts of things. And I thought, well, I'd be able to see what I'd like to do. And as an immature 18-year-old, I just thought, I fancy becoming an executive or something like that, not really knowing what an executive was. And I saw the romance of people with company cars staying in holiday inns and things like that. I'm not saying, Adam now is very different to the Adam of the 18-year-old Adam. But it's just, and so as I went through university, I kind of majored on accountancy, and I enjoyed it, and it was good, and things add up, and it's quite easy. It's quite easy to enjoy. But at my heart, I'm a bit of an extrovert, and I remember we were supposed to have placements because it was a sandwich degree year, but we were in the middle of a recession, and one of the advantages also to doing a sandwich degree is you got paid while you're doing your sandwich gap year. But I only could do, I think it was 2 weeks or a month at a placement. And what I found was I was sitting with an accountant, and this was before Excel and everything like that, I think Lotus or whatever. And he showed me his spreadsheet, and he's very proud of the spreadsheet, and he'd been spending the best part of 2 months developing the spreadsheet. And I just thought, this isn't for me. I just couldn't do it. So I thought, well, I'll spend my last year studying marketing, which is what I did, and I thrived on that, and I loved it, and it was creative and good fun. And I think that's what helped me move from just getting a passing a degree to getting a 2-2, because I actually was getting more interested in it.
So you came away with a degree, but did you work while you were at university?
I did. of course, you go back to your parents, or you certainly did in those days. And I was a cleaner. I think the role was bigged up a little bit when I was over there. It was called, we became domestic operatives. And I was essentially a cleaner in what was an old Victorian style mental health hospital. It no longer exists. If anybody wants to Google it, it was called Bromham Hospital. But I was working for the NHS, and in those days, that I remember I was getting flat rate £2.22 an hour, and I think people who work in McDonald's were on about £1.60. And it was.
I was at Woolworths and I was on £1.10.
Well, there you go. And I got double time on a Sunday.
Time and a half on a Sunday.
Yes. Those old days gone. But it was a really good job, because and something I did learn from that, you were given the key to it, and you had your duties, and you left to do the chores, the jobs you need to do in the ward, and maybe once a fortnight somebody would come and check that, licking their fingers across pictures and things like that to make sure it's clean. But they trusted me, and I suppose I'm only reflecting on this now, that I think because I was trusted and I worked hard, and I do have a work ethic, I just thought maybe that's something you need to now ingrained in me, that actually you've got to trust people you work with. And I am one of those people who I trust people until I've been let down.
Bless you. And so you were working through university, and the reason why I asked you about working through, I knew you worked while you were at university because we talked about it earlier. But I think when for those that might be watching this that are relatively new, they're starting out in their careers, it feels like there is a balance to be had around either going full on education or going full on working. And actually, maybe there's a balance in the middle of, actually, if you've got a little bit of learning along the way and you've got some experience, that puts you on a path where actually the doors open for you.
I think for me, I remember a cousin once saying this to me a long time ago. In your mid-teens, you're kind of developing your personality. And I remember now seeing, some of my cousins that I really like aspects of their personality, and people I work with. I thought, I'd aspire to be more like them, or whatever. And it kind of, I think having that balance between being able to socially interact with people, which I think for an operational manager is very, very important, as opposed to some people in academia, arguably you could argue, are quite aloof and just focused on their one subject area. That is a mass generalization. Anything on my LinkedIn about saying that. But I think what it does is gives you breadth and just gives you life skills.
Yeah.
And I think it shows, when I sometimes see people's CVs or whatever when I'm recruiting, and I see that people did hold down other jobs while they were studying or whatever, I think it looks quite good, actually, that they've got an ethic there, work ethic.
Yeah, I think so too. So you came out of university
with
a 2-1 and 2-2. Okay, a 2-2. That was close.
They used to call it Desmond, I think.
And so where did you go from there? Did you fall straight into a job, or how did you get into the contact center world?
Well, what I did was I was going around. They used to have something called a milk round in those days, which was like graduate recruitment fairs. But I wanted to do something called Camp America, BUNAC, where you go to America you work on a camp for 8 to 10 weeks, teaching American kids how to play soccer, and then you pastorally look after them in accommodation or whatever, in huts. There were chalet huts. And I wanted to do that, but I knew I couldn't do that and start as a graduate trainee in August. So I decided to do that, spent some time traveling North America, and got back to the UK in November. And I missed the milk round. So I was just constantly, and there was this, 1992, there was a recession, or 93, this was now. And I was constantly applying for jobs, and I must have applied. It was quite demoralizing at times. And I was living back with my parents. And then I got offered a graduate trainee role at what was Eastern Electricity. There were about 13 regional electricity utility companies. And that was fantastic. And part of the logic of working in customer services, well, I thought, oh, I've got some student debts, and as long as this is again Adam at 21, well, as long as they've got customers, I've got a job. And with the student debt, which was nothing compared to what students have these days, and I really liked the contact center environment. And in those days, I think what had happened with Eastern Electricity, they regionalised 9 customer services centres into just 2. And I worked in the contact centre for quite a while, and I enjoyed it, and I saw what people were doing. And I think sometimes you look at some managers, and again, it's like when you're developing, but you see some really good managers and you learn from them. But also I saw some awful pieces of management. And again, I learned from that. I just thought, I'll never do that, because people, believe it or not, you can never tell somebody to say, I'll do this for you, but don't tell anybody else, because they always will, generally speaking. And what I saw was just some pretty rotten management styles and management behaviours that drove poor behaviours. And if people remember the customer services centres, 25, 30, 25 more or so years ago, it was more about quantitative performance than qualitative. And of course, I remember somebody once being lauded that they could deal with 20 calls an hour. And I thought, well, let's just see what they're actually doing. And actually, I found out that they were just hanging up on every other call. And then, of course, as contact center technologies improved, you could see what people were doing. So you'd wonder why people were on a call, people were calling each other. But because the way people were treated, the behaviors weren't that great. But and I created something they called a short call report, so you could see, how on earth you can, when this was before we had call recording and things like that. And I thought, well, but it's quite interesting over time. I've seen that quite rightly so, the focus is on quality, and I'd far rather somebody spent twice as long dealing with a call, and the customer walks away happy and doesn't have to make 2 or 3 subsequent calls as well. And it's interesting, I talk about some of the implications of, if we go on to the police, of not dealing with a call correctly or not setting expectations correctly as well. The impact that
can have. You were at Eastern Utilities, which is now PowerGen?
No, it's now E.ON. In my time, and I was there for about 12 years, it went from Eastern Electricity to TXU Energy when there was a Texas utility company took them on. Then merged with United Utilities, then PowerGen, and I think they're now known as E.ON.
Yeah, I think you might be right. And you were there for quite a long time. And in fact, that's one of the things that I clocked with your career, is that you do spend, you don't move jobs every 2 years. You spend a good amount of time in a role or with an organisation.
Yeah, for a number of reasons. I really enjoyed Eastern Electricity, and once I started an operation management team level, I quickly moved on, and somebody gave me the opportunity, because markets were deregulating, to set up the gas customer services contact center. So we look at, and that was setting up something from scratch, and that was quite good. And I was able and given the freedom to set it up in the way that I thought it should be set up, the opposite of some of the things I'd seen previously. And then I think where my career propelled there, I was given what I thought at the time was a poison chalice. Eastern Electricity were, of course, losing a lot of electricity customers to other suppliers, and we weren't taking on gas customers in the same way or retaining our customers. And we used to do something called sales through service, but things were only given a nod to. It wasn't, they were doing 2,000 a year, and it failed, and people moved on, and it was given to me. And I thought, oh my God, there's 2 sides. This is a killer. And how many do you want? 10,000 a year? And I was like, oh my Lord. But I was given a budget for training and an incentive budget. And in those days, I knew that, a sale through television worked out about 9,000 a sale. A door-to-door salesman, where there was, you may remember, a lot of issues around that, was about £100. But sales through service was about £2. So, well, I got a group together, and that's very important to listening. I don't have a monopoly on good ideas. And as a working group, what we did is we got some trainers together, and they started delivering how you sell. And I did a survey of all the staff, and they said, well, we're customer service staff. We don't sell. We can't sell. We're not salespeople. And we're not incentivized to do it. So we got a training company in, and I fronted up every single training session, because bar none, before it started, people would say, I'm not a salesperson. I'm customer services. And we were hemorrhaging customers. And I remember saying, the rate we're going, there aren't going to be any customers to serve. And what really changed, the training helped. There were two things that changed. We had some incentives, and they were quite rubbish to begin with. It was like Olympic themed merchandise. Booze was, raffle, get a cross sale, get a ticket, and you do it. And somebody, and I can't take the credit for this, I know her name. Her name's Julie Stevens. So I've got this Barclay Card catalogue, and I think it's brilliant because you get points and then you can exchange them for items in the catalogue. Let's give her a whirl. It's quite intensive doing all this shopping at Sainsbury's and wherever. So we developed our own PowerPoint. There was a Euronics Centre shop in Bedford, and I agreed with them that they would sell the stuff to us at a slightly reduced price, and effectively a point was £1. So, and we made up this Heath Robinson catalogue that was only about 5 pages of pictures of juicers and Dysons and toasters and things like that. And I had a little admin team set up, and the sales just took off. People really liked it, and they loved the idea of when we were taking something tangible to them. And people, over about 2 weeks, were getting Dyson. So we started knowing who the cross sellers were, and that became quite intensive. And so I got in touch with a company, Fraser Hart, who did this on behalf of companies, and it just took off. And we were doing upwards of 3,000 or 4,000 cross sales a week, and it got more when we started putting the cross sellers. I was allowed to do a restructure, and we put our best cross sellers in the change of tenancy team, where you're moving house, let's take care of your guests. I'm really simplifying the process. And I had to roll that up north. I had operational teams up north, and that was going quite well.
Now, you said right at the start of that story, you said that you don't have monopoly on good ideas, but what you have just shown in that story, and from what you're saying before, is you do listen, you do watch, you do learn, and even if it's not your own idea, you build on it by the sounds of things, and then you know how to then go ahead and implement it and make a difference.
And another very important aspect to me, that Lee, is you actually give the credit to the people who had that idea. Make sure, because that helps build trust in you as well.
Yeah,
and I always admit mistakes, to my managers or whatever. And when they say, Adam, do you know nothing? I don't know. And it just builds up that trust. And I'd far rather, if when somebody makes a mistake, and we all do, they're just like, there's some logic at the time. Oh, I get that. All right, let's see how we can make it better.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm guessing that approach to how you work, it came into its own when you went to the police. So tell us about your time at the police.
Well, the reason why I was doing well at Eastern Electricity, but I met with a colleague at the De Vere White's Bolton, and he had 2 daughters. They were 17 and 15 respectively, Emily and Trey, I can't remember. He said, and I was traveling an awful lot, 3-4 nights. And he said, do you know what, Adam? I got home the other day, and there was Emily and Tracy, and they've turned into women. I haven't seen them grow up. And I, at that time, had a 4-month-old son, and I thought, the writing's on the wall here for me. This is going to be me. So literally, I was just reflecting, and I saw a role at Bedfordshire Police, and I applied for it. And I was very, very lucky. It was supposed to be a 3-stage interview process. I got through the first. I did okay, and then and it was a very difficult environment, because I was very, very mindful that I was going into a command and control centre, which looked after 999 call, non-emergency calls and all the dispatch and coordination of police officers to incidents. But within that centre, there were police staff. You have police staff and police officers, but the police officers go through quite a regimented progression. And I had 6 police inspectors reporting to me, and I was only 32, 34, and I was like, and I handled them, and maybe in hindsight, a bit too sensitive. I was very, very respectful and sensitive to them about who's this young lad or whatever coming in from. And the interesting thing is, that centre had been run by a superintendent for a while, but he didn't really know about operational management in terms of customer service operations. So although they had a fluctuating demand curve, their resourcing was flat across 24 hours. So by starting to mirror resourcing to demand, and then looking at how people were operating, and sickness was terrible there as well. I remember there wasn't any application of sickness processes or anything like that. So I started addressing all those sorts of things, and performance started turning, and then I was given more responsibility within the police service, and it just grew. And then, ironically, I was sent on something called the Wolfson course at Cambridge within 2 years, where I was away from my family for nearly 2 months. But anyway, that doesn't matter. But Cambridge and Bedford aren't too far away.
That is true. That is true. But that environment, working in the police, is quite a different environment. And from there, you then got into housing, which I can see some similarities, because you're in essence helping the public.
Being honest with you, there was a lot of talk of mergers of police forces and things like that, and it felt there was a lot of every other year you could see the same. And I saw an opportunity at BPHA, which is a fantastic opportunity, and I just thought, well, I've done 7-8 years. I've got started getting I met Anne-Marie through working the police as well, and then I decided to go into housing. And it's again, my first job at BPHA was to set up their customer services centre, so centralising things, which was a tricky job because it'd been talked about for about 4 years and nothing had happened. So there was real antagonism against it. So I had to do all the process mapping, developing the training manuals, recruitment, and a bit of restructuring as well. But it took a long time and to get over the line, but it did very well, and I enjoyed it. And the good thing about BPHA, they gave me a lot of exposure to other projects as well. I got involved in cultural I did the police, but a lot of project management, program management, and all sorts of things. And I enjoyed it. And I remember I was given free rein to do an awful lot of stuff, and doing comic relief and sport relief contact centres, which was great fun and didn't cost very much. I remember Chief Exec saying, I don't know a single initiative that builds a team of an organisation, bringing the organisation together to do volunteering, to do the payment calls for comic and sport relief.
Oh, that and do you know what? It doesn't seem quite as obvious these days, but certainly there was 10, 20 years where contact centres were absolutely the driving force behind.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh, it was like a carnival atmosphere. You had chief execs sitting next to cleaners, and taking calls with people taking payments, and we had all sorts of put on loads of food. We just had competitions and raffles, and it just brought the company together. It was just brilliant fun. Exhausting, but it was good fun.
And do you enjoy working in the contact centre? So that they would have been moments in time, but generally, do you enjoy working in our industry?
Yeah, of course. Stuck at it for 27 years, I think, and you've seen things evolve, and I think as I'm a judge for the CCMA as well, and it's fantastic. I was judging just recently in Glasgow with an organisation, and you just walk out of that feeling invigorated, hearing people's stories, and you learn a bit as well.
I just find it the more time I spend talking to people like yourself, Adam, I just find it an industry that is just so worthwhile. It's such a pivotal place in society.
I think it's gone through a huge transformation, and I think it was just seen as a holding job a long time ago or whatever. And I think it's about it's about trying to retain the right talent, allowing people to grow, coaching, supporting them, making them feel empowered, and it's as the metrics have changed, and I hear so many stories of people say, well, I never thought, I started in the contact center as a temporary job. I didn't think I'd be reaching director level and things like that after a number of years or whatever. It's a great sector to work in. I'm quite privileged in so that I've worked in a number of different sectors in both the private and the public sector as well.
No, absolutely. Now we're nearly at time, but I do want to ask you, what do you wish that you'd learned sooner?
2 ears, 1 mouth, and use them in that order. And I could tell the story about another time, but learned about politics, the small p, but no, I think it's just about listening to people. And I think, we all mature over time, but I think it's certainly listening more than speaking.
Do you know, I think I've heard that said before, possibly on CareerTalk as well, is that actually, doing a lot more listening. It's interesting that it is interesting seeing the commonalities of senior leaders in our space, the passion for people, the passion for developing people, and really making a difference. And it's really shining through. So I've got some quick fire questions for you. You ready, Adam? Okay. How many castles have you visited?
Loads, because the first 16 years of my life, my parents dragged us all to Anglesey every year. So, and it rained. So what do you think you do in Wales when it's raining? You go to castles.
I love it. I love it. So on that note, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
I'd like to go to the Maldives, actually. I just think that would be an absolute chill place. Just relaxing. It's not.
It is a chill place. The one Christmas ever that I spent away from home, and it was just before I had the kids, we went to the Maldives. Christmas in the Maldives, very, very special. Slightly weird Christmas.
Yes.
But Maldives, I'm with you on that one. It is really serene. And I think this one could be a tough one. I think it will be a tough one for you. Physical strength or mental strength?
Would I still have an element of both?
Tiny bit.
I'd probably go mental.
I think mental strength. You've got the mental strength. Maybe you can achieve more physically. Anyway, Adam, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you so much for joining me on CareerTalk here.
Lee, it's been an absolute pleasure and honour, and I'm really flattered. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam. Take care.
Have a good weekend all.